good opportunity to improve your lot, right? Most everybody, in fact, I would say everybody, who's not doing particularly well, the problem is with missing assignments, okay? You know, for the homework and the reflection questions, my only real concern is that you, in the case of the homework, you do your best and try to apply the skills that we've talked about in class. Whether you do that correctly is not something I'm concerned about, right? At least not initially. That's, it's like playing a video game. You get to, before you're successful on a level or something, you generally don't do so well, okay? It's okay to struggle and to not get it right away. But the practice is where you kind of start to figure out what you're having trouble with and need more help with. So all I want to see on the homework, right, is that you've given it that effort and that you've done it, right? So if you've completed the homework, you get all the points. If not, you get half the points, as long as you've done a substantial portion of it. Okay, we've already established that. With the reflection questions, you're not really learning skills in those questions. Sometimes there are occasions for me to talk about certain concepts. Other times, I mean them to be occasions for you to just reflect on things that I think are morally relevant questions to reflect on, okay? I'm hoping that you'll start to ask yourself questions after you've taken this class that weren't really questions that you had necessarily considered before. And so again, right, it's not about what you write, it's about seeing that you have given some thought to what I've asked you to write about, okay? I'm not interested in kind of judging your reflections. I'm more interested in just trying to prompt you to reflect. The quizzes are meant to be assessments of how well you've understood the assignments for the week, and whether and a motivation to do the reading. Okay, so, but in the grand scheme of things, those quiz grades, each week you have about 50 to 60 points, depending upon how many points the quiz is. So most of the vast majority of the points you earn each week are simply points, at least thus far in class, that you get by doing the work. If you do the work, you're going to set yourself up to do reasonably well in the class. Okay? It's not going to guarantee you an A or even a B, right? Because you might not do as well on the tests, or the tests we'll have later, or the quizzes, or the paper that I'm going to have you to write. But if you've done the work, you're going to be able to do fairly decently in the class. In the end, what I'm interested in is providing you with information and concepts that will be helpful to you, that will help you to think more critically about yourself and the world around you, ethically speaking, to give you skills that will be helpful in other coursework that you'll undertake, and to just be more reflective in general. Okay. This is not a class to prepare you to be a nurse or to prepare you to be an accountant, right? So if some of the skills are still in development when you finish up, that's okay. A lot of the benefit of some of the courses that I took in college weren't really realized for me until well after I'd completed them. This is more about trying and being open to thinking than it is about making sure that you've learned specific things and can recall them, right? Again, if you're a nurse, it's important that you know the parts of the anatomy. Here, it's more important that you start to develop skills and habits of reflection. Okay? And that's what I'm trying to motivate you to do. So, if you've got some issues with some missing work, my best advice to you is to just make sure that going forward for the rest of the semester, you're turning things in when they're due. I've tried to schedule assignments on the reading on Monday, the homework on Wednesday, reflection on Friday, with the quiz on Sunday, to make it easy for you to remember what's due and when it's due. You can always work ahead. So take your midterm grades as kind of just a indication of where things stand right now. They're not destiny in any way, right? If you're doing really well, keep doing what you're doing. Don't, stop doing that. And if you're not doing as well as you'd like to do, just make sure you're, doing what you're supposed to do. You should be okay. Okay? Does anybody have any questions for me? I have totally revamped this course. I used the yellow book last spring, but I changed it even for the first time last spring, but I changed it even more over the summer. So some of this is, you're not guinea pigs, but I am kind of, I'm kind of testing this out. Are there things that are working well that you like, things that you really don't like, or, I gave you midterm evaluation, so if you want to make suggestions to me, I'm happy to hear things.
I think for me personally with the homework,
Yeah.
like a lot of the times I'll spend too long on the homework because I'm trying to really understand and get it correctly, and so sometimes I feel like there's too many problems
Okay.
in the homework.
I want to make sure that there are enough that we have enough practice in class.
Mm-hmm.
If you find yourself struggling with it, I think what I would suggest doing rather than struggling with it is just to send me an email and say, if it's something where you're not sure what they want you to do.
Yeah.
And some of you may have noticed this, right? I usually give you a 1 or 2 item allowance. So if there's just one you're stuck on and you can't figure it out, if you skip it, I'm not gonna as long as you've done everything else, I'm not gonna not give you the credit, okay? It's usually when you skip multiple ones that I ding the grade a bit, okay? But I'll take that there were a couple days where we didn't get through everything, so I'll take that into
I'd say
consideration.
mostly just last week's homework was just, the IBE one,
This,
that past one before this one.
that one was
the
really
hardest.
long?
Yeah, that was the hardest to get through, just as trying to
Yeah.
get it right, and
That's fair. Okay.
that's it.
Maybe next semester I'll dial it back then. So
Just, I don't know, it just was hard to understand, and maybe, I used it, like, when you went over it, last Wednesday,
mhm.
I used basically the template you used for PSA,
Yeah.
or I can't say it, but I use that on basically everything else now for IBE, because it's basically the same.
Yeah,
no matter
it's the
what,
same.
so
Yeah.
Yeah, because
maybe teaching it like
yeah, along the same lines, like I wrote down all the stuff that you said for the IVE stuff, like the 2 different examples. I was still struggling, and I had it written down.
Okay.
Everything.
Okay. All right, well, so your struggles will be to the benefit of next semester's students. So I'll tell them that, and maybe they'll give you thanks next semester. I don't know. All right, well, let's talk about, let's start with Davis. We can do 4, how many of you did Davis? I'm just curious.
I got about halfway through it, not gonna lie. I did,
You did 4 times?
I did it first because it was longer.
Oh, I didn't do this.
You did, okay. You did what first?
The 4 signs or whatever it is.
I don't think it was actually longer. I think it looked longer.
There was one that was,
The Davis one, though, is 3 columns, and that makes it look shorter than it actually is.
I mean, I got halfway through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same.
I will say, I think Davis is, just in terms of reading it, hers is a little more challenging. In terms of putting it into an IBE, I think Forsheims is a little more challenging, because Forsheims, we'll talk about how you might put Forsheims in an IBE, but you could also do Forsheims pretty easily as an argument from analogy.
Yeah, that's what I told myself.
So, but we'll start with Davis. You know, work through most of this today. If we have to finish it up on Friday, we can, and then we will talk about the reflection question. Okay? So, what is the question that Davis is concerned to answer? Do you guys know what's genetic counseling? Maybe we need to kind of back up a bit.
Genetic counseling is like when you sequence like a DNA sequence of like the both parents, and you're looking at certain genetic anomalies within the strand.
Okay, and why might prospective parents go to genetic counseling?
Because they want to know what problems their potential child may have.
Okay, and if it seems that there are certain risks, what might they choose to do?
Not have a kid?
Yeah. Okay. What is Davis concerned with? Is she concerned with the prospect of prospective parents choosing not to have children, or what?
No.
What's she concerned with?
Parental autonomy versus the child's future autonomy.
Yeah.
Okay, but, right, okay. How might parents make choices that might, in terms of genetic counseling, or how might it be possible at some point to make choices that might limit the well-being of the child?
The example she uses, deaf parents wanting a deaf kid, so that.
Okay, so help me out here. Can we do that yet?
I'm not sure.
This was written in the 90s. I don't think that it was possible at that point. But it's certainly
Because you can,
select for certain traits.
yeah. I think,
I don't know if deafness is one of those.
I mean, there's a marker for it.
I'll have to double check on that. But let's,
Depends what type of deafness.
yeah. Let's assume you can, okay? I'll double check. I should have done that already. If you're a deaf parent, why might you want to have children who are deaf?
Easier for them to adapt.
Easier for them to adapt? To what?
Because they have the same disability.
Okay, and who's them? For whom is it easier to adapt, the children or the parents?
Parents.
Okay, the parents, perhaps. Okay. What else?
The deaf community is really like specialized and they're kind of selective. So having someone in your family who is hearing would be kind of alienating for them.
Okay, right. She talks about the possibility of thinking of there being deaf culture, right?
Definitely, they don't like hearing people super much.
Okay. All right. As hearing individuals, would deafness be something that you would generally
Struggled.
if you were to have a deaf child, you would find that a struggle, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Because
I'm not trying to be naive, but
No, well, I mean, I'm not able to put myself in the shoes. Like, I obviously can hear, and I feel like I hear pretty well. So, I just feel that trying to, because I wouldn't understand what they were going through, would be the basis of it.
okay. And you would have to learn a form of communication, right?
Yeah. Along with trying to teach someone else that same form of communication that I'm learning myself.
Sure. Right. And so one of the things that she talks about is some of the language delays that deaf children experience, and how it's associated with delays in reading and writing and things of that nature. So it would be hard as a hearing parent to have a deaf child. Okay. It wouldn't be as hard, of course, if you're a deaf parent. Okay. But what does she suggest? Is it only deafness that she's concerned about, or might we extend this to other things too?
Amish parents not sending their kids to high school and Jehovah's Witnesses not letting their kids get life-saving blood transfusion.
Yeah, okay, well, sorry, those are the cases.
Yeah.
Right? But are there things beyond deafness that prospective parents might choose for that would perhaps fall under the kind of the argument that she's making here? Might there be other traits, for example, that parents might choose for that most parents would choose against?
Blindness, yeah.
Okay, blindness or maybe dwarfism, okay, that sort of thing. So she's focused on deafness, but what she's saying here is not necessarily limited only to deafness, okay? So the question would be something like, should deaf parents be permitted? Or is it, no, let's say, I don't know why I want to put it this way. Is it morally permissible for deaf parents to choose to have deaf children? And the traditional position has been, and so this is sort of a question that it would impact particularly people involved in genetic counseling, right? The traditional response has been that as a genetic counselor, it's not your job to question the choices of parents, that they have the autonomy to make their own reproductive choices, okay? But this is a question that suggests that maybe we should limit that autonomy, or maybe that autonomy can be misused in some ways. That there might be cases where in a genetic counseling setting, we want to discourage what we view as the poor choices of parents, okay? So, and her answer to this is what? Is it permissible or not?
The autonomy of the individual is ethically prior to the autonomy of the group.
Where are you looking at,
I
Brooks?
can't remember what it was. It was in one of them.
I think that would be something that she would, that was probably part of the article that she's arguing against.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we want to argue, although, well, it depends upon whose autonomy we're talking about.
Yeah.
Does she think that deaf parents, that it's a good thing for deaf parents to choose, if they're able, to have deaf children? Adonis, what did you say? Is not? Is it a good thing for deaf parents to choose to have deaf children?
In their case, maybe.
Okay. Who is she concerned about here?
The child.
Okay, so the choices of the parents for Davis, right, are secondary to what's best for the child. Does that make sense? Okay. Does she suggest that deafness is something that is good for a child?
It's hard to tell. I can't tell on this one. It's like, because she says if it disadvantages them, then no, it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, deaf people think that it's not. Some deaf people think that it's not really a disadvantage; it's more of a culture. So she.
Right, but she finds that problematic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So why would deafness be harmful? I already mentioned a couple of things.
Just makes it harder to live in a world where you have to hear stuff
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times.
Do deaf children encounter challenges in communication? Okay. Do deaf children, at least in part because of that, maybe in part or maybe largely because of that, do deaf children encounter challenges in seeking employment? Do they probably have fewer opportunities available to them than hearing children would have? Yeah, okay? So there are all sorts of reasons why it would be more difficult to be deaf and more limiting to be deaf than to be hearing, okay? And so her answer is, no, it's not permissible. Okay. We'll make that the E. Okay, so 3, let's do the IDE. So we're going to do the principal justification sub-argument. Okay, kind of wish they, well, never mind. What are the cases? She talks about one case at great length and another case kind of using another person with more briefly, but they're both cases. So what are actually you already mentioned them, Brooks, what are they?
Amish parents not sending their kids to high school, and
Okay.
Jehovah's Witnesses not letting their child get life-saving blood transfusions.
Okay, so we would say that Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong to deny their children blood transfusions. There are other groups that would do that. Christian Scientists would do the same thing. And Old Order Amish.
I said high school because I think it said their cutoff was like 8th grade or something like that, so.
Yeah, how about if we just say are wrong to limit their children's education? Is that okay?
Yeah. I just didn't know if that's what it said.
Okay. Why would it be wrong for Jehovah? I think it's pretty obvious. So I'm not trying to be like, whatever. But why would it be wrong for Jehovah's Witnesses to deny their children blood transfusions? No, well, that's why they want to do it. But why would it be wrong for them to do it?
Their child could die.
Okay, because the child could die, could be very seriously harmed. Okay, why is it wrong for the Old Order Amish to limit their children's education?
It limits their opportunities.
Okay, limits their opportunities, right? Think about what your life would be like now if your ability to receive an education ended at 8th grade, right? Would you have fewer opportunities than you have now? Yeah. Even if it ended at high school, right? There are some people who choose to end their education at high school, and that can be just fine, right? But I'm assuming that you all are here, at least in part, because you recognize that earning a college degree will provide you with opportunities that not having one wouldn't offer you. Okay. All right. So those are the main cases. Okay. She talks at great length about the old. I think she talks more about the Old Order Amish than she does about deaf children.
It's like 3 pages or something.
Yeah. And she talks about that case at length because it was a Supreme Court case in Wisconsin in the 70s. And actually, it was decided in favor of the Amish. She takes issue with it. Okay.
Well, in all reality, you cannot tell somebody else they need to do with their kid or have to do with their kid.
It might be the case that, well, Garrett, it may depend upon where you live. I mean, there are some parts of the world where they literally do force.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But we're in the United States.
Right. I'm saying there'd be great cost to it.
Oh, and there's still parts of the world that we have slavery in today. So, I mean.
Right. But if we're talking about genetic counselors and counseling for or the possibility of not just accepting as an expression of their parental autonomy the choices of parents, and counseling them against certain courses of action, right? That's generally what's not done, but that's something she's saying perhaps should be done, right? So would it, maybe the question should be somewhat different. We should be more specific with the question. We might say, would it be morally permissible for genetic counselors to counsel deaf parents not to intentionally choose to have deaf children? And then we would say, yes, that would be permissible. Okay, but we'll keep it as it is for now. That's fine. Okay, we can still get the heart of the argument here. What is it that explains these cases? What's the best explanation of these two cases?
But that the child's rights should come before the group's rights, that, if that right will make the life more difficult for that child. Or, and that.
Child's rights should come before the beliefs of parents.
Okay, so there is, we're talking about the actions of parents and the ability of parents to make, to engage in certain actions that might have effects on their children, right? So we might say something like, the best explanation of these cases is that,
I was a little off kilter. I went to because she talked a lot about the culture,
yeah,
so that's where I kind of went with it instead of the parents specifically.
yeah.
So I was a little off. But
Maybe we could, the best explanation is something like this. The best explanation of these cases is that it is wrong to act in ways that limit opportunities for children. Okay? Or we could say something like that limit, in the language that she uses, a child's right to an open future. Did you understand what that meant?
yeah,
Okay, right? If you weren't clear, right, this notion that the children have a right to an open future means that they have a right to a future where they get to make their own choices, right? Where they have control over, authority over, autonomy in determining, right? Autonomy. You guys have heard that that word before? Autonomy?
yeah.
Autonomy means literally to be, if you break it down into the Greek roots, it means to be self-lawed or self-ruled. So it's being self-governing, being self-directing, okay? Being able to make your own choices, right? Now, young children who might need blood transfusions, or Amish children when they're 12 or 13, are not fully autonomous yet, right? But when parents limit opportunities available to them to life-saving care or to education, right? They're foreclosing the possibility, they're cutting off the possibility that they will in the future have those choices to make. And they're limiting the openness, metaphorically speaking, of the future that's available to their children. Okay? Okay, so then we would say the principle would be something like, it is wrong to act in ways, I'm going to make it a little briefer, that limit a child's right to an open future. Okay. And then the the principal application subargument would follow pretty straightforwardly from that, right? You'd restate this as the first premise. It's wrong to act in ways that limit a child's right to an open future, right? Deaf parents choosing to have deaf children limits those limit their children's right to an open future. Therefore, it's wrong for deaf parents to choose to have deaf children. Okay? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that, say, if deaf parents are having a child and they learn after the fact that their child is going to be deaf, that the child should be aborted. Right? This is about choices that are made purposefully and intentionally before becoming pregnant, before the process of having a child. Okay, what would be some criticisms we might have of this? Or did you find this I mean, even if you did find it to be pretty persuasive, it's still good to try to think of possible criticisms. Any ideas? Any thoughts?
The one she levied was just, even against her own position, was if it was a culture, if it was considered a culture, then it wouldn't be as much of a disadvantage as such a community instead.
Okay, so maybe we could take, and she seems to kind of reject that notion, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Where does she say it?
It's like towards the end.
Yeah, she says, if deafness is a culture rather than a disability, this is on the right column of page 13 toward the top, it is an exceedingly narrow one, right? So it seems fairly clear that she's trying to downplay the argument for deafness as a culture. And if it were a culture, we might want from it more than it seems to be able to produce, right? A culture that could sustain opportunities for deaf children, maybe there would be, and maybe that is something that's possible, right? You might be able to point to institutions that exist for deaf people that can sustain opportunities for their children, right? Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. is a university for deaf students. Rochester Institute of Technology in New York is not a deaf university per se, but they have programs for deaf students. So insofar as there are institutions and things of that in place, if they're viable opportunities for children, okay, they may be too limited. But if they were viable, that might be a reason to question that. To say that deafness does not necessarily limit a child's future, and being born to deaf parents provides more opportunity than being born deaf to deaf parents provides more opportunity for the deaf child than being born deaf to hearing parents. Right? A lot of her argument about the challenges that deaf children face is focused on the challenges that are faced by deaf children of hearing parents. Okay. All right. Does this make sense, though? Okay. I think the IBE was fairly clear. You could have articulated this as just a straightforward argument from principle about, the right to an open future, but it works as an IBE too. Obviously, the argument from principle follows from the IBE. Not Forsheims. That's another reading. We already did that one. La Follette, here I'm getting confused because in my bioethics class, we read a different article about licensing by La Follette for other stuff. So excuse me if I get confused. La Follette's argument is harder to, I think, articulate as an IBE, but it's possible. I think it maybe would work even better as a argument from analogy.
I just know I rewrote it like 6 times and
Yeah.
didn't think it was right. So
Okay, well, let's at least start to talk about, okay, yeah, we won't finish with this today. But that's okay, because we didn't get finished in the last class either. So let's talk about what the question is and at least get started on how he articulates his argument. So what's his driving question?
Is it morally permissible to license parents?
Yeah, maybe even something stronger than that. Because if you say it's morally permissible to do it, that leaves open the possibility that it might be, you can do it, but you don't have to do it. And he's suggesting it's something we ought to do. Okay? So, should we license parents? Is this kind of a weird, did this seem like a weird argument to you?
Yes.
Or at least the idea behind it?
No.
It didn't. Okay.
She
Why?
I feel like she had good comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But when you first encountered what was what he's talking about, did you think, oh, why are you arguing about this?
I mean, I thought it was kind of weird upon reading the question at first, and
Yeah.
then I was upon reading it, I was like,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, have you ever seen, could be just a passing, something you see in passing, where you see a parent and a child at a store, and you might think, oh, that woman has no business, or that guy has no business being a parent. Or you might know somebody, right? They have no business being a parent. You ever encountered that? My wife is a clinical social worker, and she works with middle and high school age kids. It's almost always the case that and these kids have just trauma upon trauma upon trauma, and in many of these instances, if not most of them, it's a function, at least in large part, of poor parenting. If we recognize that parents have some bearing on their children's well-being, then what might initially seem like kind of a counterintuitive proposal begins to start seeing a little more, a little bit more attractive, at least. Okay, so her answer is what? Should we do it or should we not do it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, we should. Okay. Okay, so for the IDE, okay, what are the cases that she uses here? Let me ask this question first, maybe to clarify a term that may not be initially clear. He talks a lot about professionals, right? People he calls professionals. What does he mean by a professional?
Like people who have gone to school to get a degree and they're certified by a certain board of standards.
Yeah, I'm right. So he's talking about, a lot of times we'll use the word profession or professional to just mean a job that you have, right? He's not talking about professional athletes or professional chefs, people who get paid to do certain things, or professional barbers, right? He is talking about people who have received specialized training for a certain in certain skills that they provide to other people and for which they have to receive some sort of license. Now I know barbers have to be licensed and stuff like that in some states at least. But that's not what he really has in mind. He has in mind people who have to be licensed to provide certain kinds of services to certain kinds of people. And what those services are and who those people are matters. Okay? So what would be the primary example of professionals that he has in mind here who have to be licensed? Okay, so doctors, what else?
Dentists, chiropractors.
Okay, don't make me spell chiropractor, give me somebody else. Lawyers, what was that? Okay, yep, okay, that's fine, that's, or not have to be, should be, sorry. Okay, let's just talk about this for a second. Why do you want your pharmacist to be licensed?
Don't screw up your drugs.
Yeah. Why do you want your lawyer to be licensed?
Don't screw up the case.
Right. And if there's, I don't know the entire process of licensing for lawyers, but the probably immediate precursor to licensing is passing the bar, right? My wife is licensed as a social worker, so she had to take an exam, right? So oftentimes there's an examination that then provides you with a license of some sort, right? Teachers are generally considered professionals. If you're a college teacher and you have a PhD, the licensing is sort of in the form of all the hoops you have to jump through to get the PhD and that sort of thing, okay? If a lawyer's not licensed and tries to practice law, what happens?
Go to jail.
Or some, I don't know.
Fine.
I don't know what the penalty is exactly, but there's some sort of penalty, right? If a pharmacist is unlicensed and dispenses drugs, that maybe kills somebody. What might happen might be determined by the kind of harm, but I'm sure the pharmacist, if somebody died because of a misprescribed.
It's probably just all that stuff would be malpractice.
Yeah, but if somebody is seriously physically
that'd be-
harmed, then they would probably,
Reckless
Suffer.
endangerment or something like that.
yeah.
They'd frown upon that a little bit more.
Huh?
They'd frown upon that a little bit more.
Yeah, a little, they frown upon it. Yeah, that's probably putting it mildly. Okay. Does he talk about anybody besides these professionals?
Not really.
Okay. What about adoption?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is much later in the article. He's already largely kind of established his case, right? But where is that?
336.
Yeah, 336, right? He talks about adoption. And it's a different kind of licensing, but like foster parents and adoptive parents have to be licensed in some way, shape, or form, right? So, he doesn't talk about foster parents, but that would apply here too, okay? And what would the process of becoming an adoptive parent involve?
Background check, financial record check,
And
home
home
visit.
visits, yeah.
Okay. Why are we going to license adoptive parents? Or at least, if licensing isn't required everywhere, in a formal sense, why are we going to engage in licensing-like activities, like investigating their home life and their financials and things of that nature? I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. Why is it that we want to do that?
To protect the kids.
Okay. What is it about the kids that makes them in need of protection?
They're vulnerable.
They're vulnerable, right? So kids are vulnerable. Patients seeking care from doctors or pharmaceuticals from pharmacists are vulnerable. People who need legal defense are vulnerable, right? Going to the dentist is vulnerable. What's the worst thing about the dentist? Is it the smell of the cutting of the teeth, or is it the sound of the drills?
It's when they floss you wrong.
When they
When
floss.
they dig into your gums and they're like, oh, your teeth aren't good. It's like, stop digging into my gums.
very unpleasant, yeah. Anybody here really like going to the dentist? There's always one weirdo. Yeah, always one weirdo who likes going to. I mean, I like the what happened. You know how I feel afterward. But the process itself kind of sucks. All right. So what's the best explanation here? How might we best explain those different but shared judgments?
You must have like expertise and like the knowledge and skills required to be able to be licensed or to be proficient in that.
Okay, yeah. We probably want to get at why that knowledge and those skills are, I've been losing words all day today, I'm sorry. Verifying, right? That they, or at least trying to ensure that the people in question have the relevant knowledge and skills. Why is it important? We've already talked about this a little bit. We just want to put the pieces together.
Because then you know that they're capable of doing it correctly?
Right. I mean, why is it important that they do it correctly?
To not endanger anyone else?
Okay. Because they're dealing with people who could suffer harm, right? Who are vulnerable and can suffer harm, right? Is that something like, the best explanation of these cases is that we should license people who care for or have responsibility for, maybe that's a better way to put it. Or whose actions deal with dependent, vulnerable individuals. Or who are responsible, different ways we could put it, right? Whose actions deal with or people who are responsible for dependent, vulnerable individuals, something like that, okay? And then we would just say that, the conclusion is this, right? So that's our principle, okay? So our conclusion would be, so we should license people whose actions or who are responsible for deal with or who are responsible for dependent, vulnerable individuals. That would be our principle for the principal application sub-argument, okay? We would say children are dependent, vulnerable individuals. Therefore, parents should be licensed, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, we'll talk about some possible criticisms of that at the beginning of class on Friday, and then we'll talk about the reflection question, okay? See you guys, have a good day.